I know you've got an ear out for the start of the podcast, but before we jump into today's episode, I wanted to remind you to keep an eye out for Darryl Lee's limited edition Christmas treats, because they're in stores now. Like the iconic Christmas nougat pudding, so yummy and a gorgeous little gift. And some delicious Chrissy-themed twists on your favourite treats, like the Darryl Lee Rockley Road with chewy red and green jelly pieces, green and red crunchy milk chocolate balls, my favourites, and green apple and strawberry flavoured licorice. Watch them disappear. Your Christmas treats table will pop with colour and scrumptiousness. Spread some joy, bring the fun, and enjoy the Christmas tradition that is Darryl Lee. Hurry before they sell out. Darryl Lee makes Christmas better. This is The 5 of My Life with me, Nigel Marsh. The series where I talk to notable people about 5 of their defining things. The way it works is my guests always choose a favourite film, book, song, place and possession. They tell me their choices in advance so I can research them, but they don't tell me why they've chosen them. That's the subject of our conversation. The reason I devised this series is I wanted to create a slightly different way to gain an insight into the real lives and thoughts of prominent people. Dr. Amantha Imber, CEO of Inventium and host of the #1 business podcast How I Work, is one of Australia's most intriguing business figures. In this conversation, I loved hearing how she rose to the 5 of My Life challenge. Her wholehearted commitment to the format made it a fabulously entertaining and enlightening discussion to be a part of. So Amantha, welcome to 5 of My Life.
Thanks for having me, Nigel.
Well, listen, before we get stuck into your choices, I just have to say congratulations on your podcast, How I Work. I mean, it's sensational. It's not the sort of thing that I traditionally, it's not my wheelhouse, but you've done over 300 episodes and it's sensational.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. I mean, I love doing it. It's just been such a learning curve, starting a podcast 3 years ago and, I get paid to learn. So how awesome's that?
And am I right? It's 300 episodes?
Yeah, I think it's maybe over 300 now. I don't know. I don't count.
I can't recommend it highly enough. I've just listened to the David Williamson one, which was just fantastic. Now, but we do things slightly differently here at 5 of My Life, and I have to thank you for taking the challenge seriously and giving thoughtful choices and thoughtful consideration to your stories. So thank you very much for that. We're going to start, as always, with the film. And your choice on 5 of My Life is the 1988 adaptation of Iris Rayner Dart's 1985 novel, Beaches. Tell me about that.
So I haven't seen Beaches since I think I was a teenager. So Beaches, what I remember about it is just sobbing. I absolutely sobbed. And I will sometimes cry during films, but I sobbed during Beaches. And why that happened, when I was 16 years old, my mum was diagnosed with ovarian cancer. And for those not familiar with ovarian cancer, it's a bit of a life sentence. It's not a good cancer to get. And mum got diagnosed. She was 44 at the time and had surgery, and the surgeon said, we've removed the lump. I think it was, I don't know, maybe like grapefruit size. It was quite a big lump, and you should be okay, fingers crossed, because we don't think it's spread. But 2 years later, it had spread. She got a recurrence, and she was given a 25% chance of being alive in 5 years' time. So that was obviously a pretty crap year. I was 18, I was doing year 12, and I remember I didn't cry a lot. Like, it was a really stressful time, but I don't remember crying much, which is kind of crazy given I had a really high chance of my mother dying at a pretty pivotal kind of age. And I feel like Beaches for me was kind of like therapy, because one of the main women dies in Beaches, and I think that was the thing that actually made me realize, oh my goodness, I'm really close to losing my mother. And I'm very happy to say that my mum is still alive. So that's the positive ending of that story. She's still with us. I think she's like 71 or 72 years old now. But yeah, it's weird because I'm 44 at the moment, and I found it a really weird year to go, wow, I can't imagine being this age. And I've got a 7.5-year-old daughter, and um, and being diagnosed with a life-threatening illness.
But putting my therapist's hat on, you don't strike me as repressed or emotionally bottled up. But why do you feel that you hadn't been in touch with your sort of emotional reaction to your mum's news, and it took a film to prompt it?
I think it was just too much for me to accept. I think that's one thing. But secondly, I don't think that my parents really let me in on how dire the prognosis was. Like they were pretty upbeat. I have vague memories of my mum going through chemotherapy when I was 18 years old and losing her hair. And for my mum, that's a really big deal. Her hair is her thing. Like she looks a lot like Cher, and she used to get mistaken for Cher whenever we'd go traveling in America. So she's got like big black curly hair, and she lost all that. And one of my most vivid memories from that time actually is I learnt to sew from a very young age, like on a sewing machine, and how to make patterns and garments. And one of the things I did while she was going through chemo is we designed a pattern for a hat that she could wear to cover up her bald head. And I think I made about 80 hats. And like I don't remember the sadness so much around that time, but I do remember sitting at the sewing machine sewing about 80 hats in a several week period.
And if you don't mind me asking, does once one has recovered, which I'm thrilled to hear, does hair grow back, or forever and a day you have to wear wigs?
No, it does grow back. So yes, she's got a full hair of black curly hair, possibly dyed black curly hair.
It's funny you mention how important hair is to your mum, because my mum, God love her, who recently passed away, but she would go swimming and not get her hair wet. And you go, how? But how can that happen? I mean, how can you go swimming? I mean, you dive into the pool, and that's the first thing you do, and then you do swimming where every stroke your hair is wet. You go, no, mum can go swimming for half an hour at the sea, in a pool. It doesn't matter, and you don't get your hair wet, because that's not what you do.
Oh my gosh, how does she manage that? Because I hate having wet hair.
It's the English breaststroke with your neck up like a swan.
I'm going to practice that over summer.
Now, I don't want to burst your bubble, but can I save you? I want you to dodge a bullet. Is just hold the memory of Beaches and how important is it to you in your heart, and don't rewatch it, because I've bloody watched it for you. And it it doesn't age well. And I think Rotten Tomatoes have gone. They gave it 40%, and I reckon that's an overreach. Sentimental schlock, Amantha.
I'll take your advice, but I do love the music from it. I like Under the Boardwalk. That's still one of my favorite songs. I think that's from Beaches, isn't it?
Well, the big one was Wind Beneath My
Oh,
Wings.
yes. That's not on high rotation for me.
Well, listen, we're gonna move from the 80s to the noughties, and I might hold a grudge that you made me watch Beaches, but I will forever and a day be grateful that you got me to read and also watch a video of a reading of Lost and Found by Oliver Jeffers, 2005 kids book, that starts with the line, "Once there was a boy, and one day he found a penguin at his door." And I know it's written for 4-year-olds, but I thought it was enchanting. Can you tell us why you have chosen Lost and Found?
Oh my God. So I'm a massive Oliver Jeffers fan, and I discovered him when I read The Day the Crayons Quit, which he illustrated. It's such a charming children's book. And then I just bought every single book that he's written for kids. And Lost and Found, I just think, is such a beautiful story. This boy finds a penguin on his doorstep, and the book is all about how he tries to return the penguin to where he came from, the North Pole. but then the penguin is a mute penguin, as I guess most penguins don't speak English. And then the boy realizes once he reaches the North Pole that actually all the penguin wanted was company. And so he goes
Yeah.
back and rescues the penguin. And I can't read this book without tearing up. Like, I'm not getting emotional. Didn't get emotional talking about beaches, but I'm feeling myself like very emotional thinking about Lost and Found. And look, for me, I was actually never a big reader as a child, much to the disappointment of my mum, she's a clinical psychologist, but she's also a writer and just a massive bookworm. And it was kind of when I guess probably in my 20s is when I discovered a love of reading, and now I feel like one of my distinguishing characteristics is I'm such a bookworm. I'm just so happy reading. And for me, having my daughter Frankie, just instilling a love of books and stories with her is something that I just think is so important and such a valuable gift for a parent to give. And so from a very young age, myself and my now ex-husband, we always read to Frankie at night. That is a ritual. Like, I can't think of a night that I've had with Frankie where I haven't read to her. And Lost and Found really signifies that. And now that she's getting older, she's going into grade 3 next year, and she's becoming a good little reader herself. We've evolved the routine where I'll read to her, and then we do a thing called Q&A time, which is about asking each other questions to just promote curiosity. I think I got that tip from Adam Grant as a good little routine to get into, to just promote curiosity. Not that Frankie needs any help in that department, not that most kids do. And then we do silent reading time, where I'll bring in a book that I'm reading and Frankie will read to herself, although it's generally she'll read out loud and I'll try to block out the noise as I'm trying to read my book. But yeah, I just think reading's just the best.
Now, you mentioned your mum was a clinical psychologist, but you are as well, aren't you?
I'm an organizational psychologist. So a clinical psychologist is probably what most people would think of when they think of a psychologist, someone that is working one-on-one with people that are going through a really difficult time. They might have some sort of mental health issue that they're generally doing, like talk therapy, if you like. But an organizational psychologist helps people be better at work, perform better, be happier at work, get more joy from their work. And that's what I do.
But I find you a terrifying self-improver. I mean, I find it exhausting just chatting to you because you mentioned you're always on the lookout for tips, which means you must be a fabulously efficient person. But I think I'm just a bit more stupid and lazy.
But you do respond to every email that you get, Nigel.
I do, every single bloody one. 30,000 in the last 10 years. They've all got a reply. Gosh, so do you ever think that you might overthink things or not? At the risk of criticising my guests.
Did I ever think that I would overthink things? That's like such a meta question to think about, isn't it?
I mean, just generally. So I think, I've got 4 kids and I read them all stories, but we never had Q&A, and quite, I sort of my reading was sort of slightly less impressive than yours. But
I think I do, but then I'll also think, like, with regards to parenting, for example, like I think so much about work and my work processes and strategies and tools to improve the way I work, but then I'm like, but hang on, I need to apply the same discipline to parenting because there's no more important pursuit on this world. And then I'll sort of beat myself up for, not being like a perfect, in inverted commas, parent who doesn't, obsess over how can I optimize my child's life. But I know that that's ridiculous. I'm aware that I'm saying things and I'm sounding like ridiculous.
Well, I'm here to help you get in touch with your inner mediocrity. Don't worry. I'm going to rebuild you. Now, we're going to move to the 60s, and you've chosen just a fabulous song that everyone craps on about, the Phil Collins version, but it's the original girl band version that's the best, which you've chosen.
Hey, hurry, love, oh, you just have to
Harry Love by the Supremes. Diana Ross knocking it out the park. Tell us why you've chosen that on Five of My Life, Amantha.
I tell you what, when I was going through the five things to choose, song was the hardest. And I think because I am a musician, there are so many songs that, mean so much to me or have played a role in different parts of my life. But I think I got inspiration when I was trying to think of a song to put forward. Spotify had kindly summarized the songs that I'd listened to most in 2020. And 2020 was, I guess, like a pivotal or a seminal year for me because in August 2019, I'd separated from my husband. And I mean, 2020 was obviously a seminal year for many people thanks to the pandemic. But like I'd moved to a new suburb, I'd moved house. I was adapting to life as a single parent, and I looked with interest at what Spotify had put together, and that song was on it. You Can't Hurry Love, and like I love the song. Like how can you not? And as does Frankie, and we'll play and sing that together on the guitar, and Frankie will accompany me on the tambourine.
There you go again with your terrifying overachievement.
No, but if you heard it, you'd go, no, that's not really overachieving. That's quite ordinary. For me, like the song is all about having patience. And I was about to say one of my goals for 2020. Oh my God, stop with the overachieving and the goals. But it was a goal, is to try to bring more patience to my life. I tend to, like once I make a decision, like I tend to act quite quickly and I get sort of really impatient when things move slowly. But I realize that patience is a really important skill that I'm still trying to learn. And I think, when I think about patience in, the context of love and, trying to find love again, like post marriage, this is going to sound stupid, but it's like, it's so different to pursuing work related goals. Like with work, I've become deeply aware that it's like, if I have a work goal and if I work towards it and dedicate time towards making progress towards that work goal, I'll probably achieve it, or at very least, I will make objective progress. But when it comes to finding love, you sadly can't apply the same logic. Like a lot of it is patience, some of it is luck. And that is something that I struggle with and that I'm trying to learn. So that song really resonates with me because it's a lesson that I'm trying to work on.
Are you on the apps, the old Bumble, Hinge, whatever?
Intermittently, I am on the apps because, meeting people face to face was tricky being a Melburnian over the last couple of years.
It's an interesting, like a catch-22, where in matters of the heart, authentic connection and blah, 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 it's not just not like work. It can make it less likely. If you walk into a pub or a nightclub or a restaurant and say, hello, I really want kids and marriage. Who would like, people be sort of running, screaming for the hills. Whereas if it's almost like the less effort you make, the more chance one gets. I mean, I'm talking about a certain age. So have you got horror story? I mean, don't tell them now unless you want to, but have you got horror stories of idiotic men that you meet on awkward first dates?
Oh God. I've got a few horror stories. Like I've been on quite a few dates. There was one guy I connected with quite early on and he was I remember when we would text messaged initially when we connected on the app, and at the end of every message he would put like a little rose icon as if like I was a successful contestant in The Bachelor, like progressing to the next round.
Oh, that's what you think. You're projecting, Imber. You are projecting. That poor bastard was just being nice.
But then it turns out, right, like he's defining himself as this very successful businessman. Okay. And so we make a time, in between his meetings with like Europe and the US and blah, blah, blah to have like a video chat. And in the meantime, like my Google skills have gotten very, very good, like finding people with just a first name and occupation. I'm your person if you need to track someone down. And I did find him online, and it turns out he'd committed all this fraud. Like, he was wanted for like highly criminal activities in his business operations. And I'm like, oh my goodness, what have I matched with? But for the most part, it's it's been a positive experience. But I tell you what, one thing that does make it easier dating in your 40s compared to your 20s, which was the last time I dated, is that I just remember one of the things that I think led to several bad decisions in my 20s around who I dated was just that again, like, coming back to patience. It's like I knew I wanted to have a child in this lifetime, and so like a lot of your decisions are kind of predicated on having a biological clock as a woman, and perhaps not making particularly good decisions because of that sense of urgency. But I think one of the things I am enjoying in my 40s dating is it's like there's no hurry. So in that sense, it does make it easier to be patient.
I am slightly loathed to ask this question, but it genuinely intrigues me. Are you able to talk to what you think went wrong in the marriage, and was it a good split, a bad split? Are you still best mates like many of my mates? They've got these fabulously successful blended, families, and other people, they can't stand each other's guts and blah blah blah. But give me the safe to air version.
I guess in terms of why the marriage ended, it's a funny one because there was nothing objectively wrong in that. There was no abuse, there was no like addiction or substance abuse issues, there were no affairs. Like, there was nothing that you could kind of go, that's why I did it. But I think it was just the culmination of many years of really questioning how compatible we were in terms of what we were striving for in life, what our values were. In terms of deciding whether to leave or not, it would have been different if we didn't have a child. But right towards the end, when I was getting clarity on what to do, and I asked myself, well, if Frankie didn't exist, would I leave? And the answer was 100% yes. But then I asked myself, well, is this the relationship that I want to be role modeling to my daughter? And the answer was no. And just asking myself, I think, better questions really helped bring me clarity on what to do. I mean, I think for anyone that is thinking about or does end up leaving a relationship where there's not this big objective thing that is broken and that other people can look at and go, oh, well, you have to leave. Like, I personally think it's a hard decision and it's a brave decision. And I feel really proud of myself because I think it's something that I did that took a lot of guts, and it's been a good decision.
Well, I'm glad it's working. It's working for you. And thank you for talking to that. I know that might not be the cheeriest topic to investigate. Now, before we move on to your next choice on Five and Love, I have to mention the Spotify playlist, because you mentioned that Spotify told you that you've been listening to You Can't Hurry Love, blah, blah, blah. Is if you go on Spotify and type in whatever it is, the Five My Life podcast song choices, it's utterly unique because unlike what the algorithms do in every other case, because they say you liked You Can't Hurry Love, so listen to this, is the Spotify playlist is your favourite song will be different to Julia Gillard's, will be different to John Eales, will be different to Kevin Rudd's. So you've got like a 5-hour playlist for a long car drive, or whether you're mowing the lawn, that is the opposite of what the algorithms give you.
So there actually is a Five of My Life Spotify playlist.
And there will be on it in the next 10 minutes, You Can't Hurry Love from the Supremes. My dentist, God love her, plays it in her surgery because...
Oh my God.
It's sensational. You've got an electronic choir piece from Anya Hindmarch, and you've got some heavy metal from the Commando Steve, and now we've got You Can't Bloody Hurry Love from Amantha.
Oh my gosh, I'm gonna get that playlist. That's awesome.
For your fourth choice, now I'm going to test you out. Here we go, because you've got the brain the size of a small African country, but I reckon I might know a word that you don't know. Do you know what a metonymy is?
No.
brilliant. So on Five of My Life, I want to do this until I die. I'm so committed to Five of My Life. And there's three things I want to do: entertain, educate, and elevate. Okay, don't tell anybody. That's under the radar. So it's a very sort of I'm sort of underplaying it, but I actually would like some people, beyond being entertained, to actually learn a few things, but without making it self-helpy. You chose Broadway, and because I do my research, I watch the films, I read the books, I listen to the songs, I researched the 53-kilometre road that goes from the financial district on the southern tip of Manhattan to Sleepy Hollow, literally Sleepy Hollow. It's called Sleepy Hollow in Westchester County, New York. But that wasn't your bloody choice, because you were using Broadway as a metonymy. And metonymy, you think you're clever, but I'm giving you a new word. So you can have it for free in your professional work, Amantha. There you go. So metonymy is when you use a word to describe a concept that is referencing something that's close to it. So if I say the White House has gone to war with Iraq, it's not actually the White House. It's America. Yeah. If I say the Crown is displeased by Meghan, it's not the headdress of the Queen. It's the royal family. So when Amantha Imber on Five of My Life chooses Broadway, she doesn't mean the bloody street Broadway that I've researched, wasted all my time. You mean the theatre district.
I do. Metonymy. How do I spell
what
metonymy?
A great METONYMY. You're welcome. Metonymy.
Thank you.
Overthink that. Anyway, so back to the metonymy of Broadway. Why did you choose Broadway?
If I could go traveling anywhere right now and not catch some horrible variant of COVID, I would go to Broadway and I would consume lots of musical theatre. So I often say, like, if I wasn't doing what I do now for work, if I wasn't an organizational psychologist, and if I had like the talent of a triple threat, so singing, dancing, acting, I would be a star on Broadway. That would make me so happy. Or if I didn't have that talent, I'd be a theatre critic whose job it was to just watch musical theatre productions and review them. So I love theatre. I particularly love musical theatre. I'm such a musical theatre nerd. I know way too many lyrics to way too many songs. But I think for me, theatre was something I got into in a big way in high school. I remember year 8 was when I had a lead role in a school play, and throughout high school I was really shy at school. Like even putting my hand up to ask a question in class would make me very, very nervous, and I would hate recess and lunchtime because it would mean having to talk to people. I'd much prefer to just lock myself away in a toilet cubicle. But I felt like it was in theatre or drama class that was where I feel like who I really was started to come out. And I loved doing acting and I loved doing plays because I felt like it was someone giving me permission to talk, and people kind of had to listen because, I was on stage. And that was really novel for me because I was too shy to talk because I just didn't think that anyone really wanted to hear what I had to say. So, I then went on and, did a lot of improv and theatre sports for a few years, like from when I was about 16 to my early 20s. And again, I credit theatre with helping me come out of my shell and giving me this confidence that I really didn't know that I had inside me. And now, like, so much of my work is performative. Like I do a hell of a lot of keynote speaking, and the podcast that I host, How I Work, has a performative element. So yeah, I wonder what direction my life would have gone in had I not got involved in theatre.
That's such a lovely story. So what a wonderful impact on your life. And in a way, it's a great bridging step from, you don't think you've got a right to a voice, but you do think you've got the right to voice other people's content because it's a play. And then you've morphed into now, when you're on one of your platforms, you're doing your own content. So you've evolved to not only I can be on the stage and people looking at me and I'm the centre of attention, but you can actually very successful businesswoman and very successful podcast, but lots of that's your own content. What a lovely sort of chrysalis story that theatre had that effect on you.
Yeah, that's an interesting insight because I got so into theatre, right? Like I always knew I wanted to become a psychologist from when I was a teenager, but when I discovered theatre, I thought, actually, no, I think I want to be an actor. And what I really wanted to do when I graduated from high school is audition for one of the big acting colleges like VCA or NIDA or WAPA. And my parents, they were internally freaking out, but I didn't realize this at the time. And they said, okay, well, let's make a deal. Enroll in a Bachelor of Arts and you can do your psychology major and do a theatre studies major. And then after you finished your BA, then if you still want to audition for acting school, you can. And at the same time, like you mentioned your dentist before, I had the same dentist from when I was a child to quite recently. He's just retired. And I remember seeing him when I would have been like 18 or 19 years old. And he was telling me that he had like a few actors that were his clients in his practice, and they'd all gone through stages where they couldn't afford dental work because acting doesn't pay very much. And I thought, oh God, like, because I'm so obsessed about dental hygiene because I have a phobia of injections in my gums. So I'm sort of avoidantly motivated to, just brush my teeth really well and avoid fillings. But I then found out, like about 20 years later, it would have been, that my parents told him to tell me that to try to dissuade me from being an actor.
That is the wonderful version of, I don't know if this is apocryphal, my grandparents telling my mother that the sound that the ice cream van makes means it's empty. Oh no, they're playing Greensleeves. They've sold out again. Now, on 5 Mile Life, are you ready for another piece of education?
Oh, please.
Do you know what on Broadway means?
Is that a trick question?
No, it's not.
Oh, sorry, no, I do. It means the size of a theatre. Is that what you're?
Yes, it's got nothing
the
to
number
do.
Of seats.
Well, yes, nothing to do with the street. So, do you know what off Broadway means?
I think is on Broadway more than 400 seats?
It's more than 500. Off Broadway is between 100 and 500, and off Broadway, which I thought was miles away from New York. It's got
like Brooklyn.
Yeah, off Broadway can be on Broadway. But it's a metonymy. It's not. It's not a literal thing. Anyway, we're going to move to my favourite choice on 5 My Life, which is the possession. And you have chosen, I loved researching this, you have chosen a guitar that is from a world-famous brand based in Melbourne, set up by Ray and Bill May. It's the guitar of choice of Neil Finn and Paul Kelly, so you're in fabulous company. Maytone 325C guitar. Why have you chosen that?
So I've had this guitar since I was, I think, 16 or 17 years old. So it's the possession that I've had for the longest. And when I think about what would I rescue if my house was burning down, like it would be the Maton. It's kind of like obviously
after Frankie,
my daughter. Yeah. Before or after, I don't know. No. But in all seriousness, if like I'm talking about material, physical possessions that are like a non-living or breathing, it would be that guitar. It's really the only thing that I own that I just, I don't think I could replace easily. So I didn't realize this at the time, but the school that I went to was a very musical school. So I just thought it was incredibly normal to, for every year, like from prep or grade 1 to be studying an instrument and, learning it, taking, regular classes in it. And so I think, by the age of 16 or 17, there were probably, I don't know, 5 or 6 instruments that I could play to like a grade 1 standard. And guitar was something, I had a few lessons in guitar, but I'm actually largely self-taught. And now, while I abandoned my dreams of becoming an actor, what happened during my undergrad studies is that I was doing a bit of acting and kind of feeling a bit disillusioned with the idea of being an actor and having so much of your success be based on what you look like. And I'd actually turned to doing more writing, so more creative writing, like script writing and screenwriting. And then I became frustrated with that because it's so hard to actually get your work performed. And then for whatever reason, I'm like, maybe I'll try songwriting. And I think at the time I had a broken heart, and it seemed like just a really good therapeutic outlet to write songs. And then combined with that, I went on and I started, I was doing my honors year in psychology, and that's a horrible, horrible year. Like it was the hardest year. It was harder than doing my doctorate or PhD. I was always looking for just ways to procrastinate, basically, from the horrible task of writing a thesis. And so I started writing songs, and that kind of helped with some of the heartbreak that I was dealing with. And then I think it was during my doctorate that I'm like, okay, I need like a serious procrastination thing here because the doctorate was hard work. And so I thought, and at the same time, I think I saw an ad in the newspaper for producers. And I thought, why don't I give them a call and pay for them to record some of the songs that I was writing? And and so I did that. And then I think we recorded like a 4-track demo that later turned into a 10-track album. And then, like, being, the ridiculous type A personality that I am, I'm like, well, I've got this 10-track album. I guess I need a record label, as you do. And so well, I don't know if this exists anymore, but I got the Oz Music Industry Directory, which is like the yellow pages for the music industry, or at least it was. And at least, like, every manager, every agent, every record label, every publisher. And so I got that, and despite being quite musical, I didn't have particularly broad musical tastes in terms of what I was listening to, and I didn't know the names of many bands and artists. So I went through all the record labels in the book, and I circled the ones that I knew, some of the bands or artists that were on the label, because I thought, well, if I know them, they're probably quite a big label. And so there were about 10 labels, and I thought, okay, I'll send my 10-track demo slash album off to all these labels and see if they want to represent me. So bloody naive. I think I was 21 at the time, and I got a few rejections back. And then I remember I was I was driving to the car park. I was literally parking at the Monash Clayton car park, and I get this phone call, and the guy on the other end says, "Hi, it's John here from Roadrunner Records." And I said, "Hi." And he said, "I've been listening to your album all morning. I've played it for everyone at the label, and it's completely polarized people. People either love it or they hate it. And I know that music that polarizes is what sells. When can I meet you?"
Wow. Wow,
I
wow,
know.
wow. This story's going to go in a surprising direction because you're talking to me and I know you're not Lady Gaga. So what?
So what happened? So I met with John a couple of weeks later, and he's like, "Where have you been? Why haven't I heard of you?" And I'm like, I don't know. Probably because I'm not a real musician. And anyway, so he's like, "I love this. I want to sign you. But first I need to see you play live because we make the majority of our money from artists on, them touring and playing live." And so he said, "So have you got a band?" And I said, "Yes," even though I didn't. And he said, "So have you got some gigs coming up? Because I'll invite the whole label down to your next gig." And I said, "Yeah, I've got some gigs coming up in the next few weeks." And obviously I didn't, because I didn't have a band. And I said, "So I'll just let you know when the next gig is." And he said, "Yeah, great. And I'll invite the whole label to come down." I'm like, oh, oh, fuck. And so anyway, in the next few days, I think I just reached out to a bunch of friends, and I'm like, I needed a guitar player, bass player, keys player, drummer. So I needed to find 4 musicians very quickly and also get a gig. And I can't remember what came first because I did get a gig, and I think it was at I think it was like the Yarraville Hotel, random. And I managed to cobble together a band, and we did some rehearsals, And then, I said to John, "Oh yeah, I've got a gig coming up," and they all came, and that they're like, "Yeah, yeah, this is great. Don't quite know about the band, but you're great. So let's let's continue." And so anyway, spent the year basically working with the label. Also got a manager as well. Again, through the same process of Oz Music Industry Directory. Do I know anyone they manage? Um, he turned out to be an alcoholic. So I got a new manager, and it was probably one of the most miserable years of my life, where I realized a few things. Like, firstly, I realized it just became so little about the actual music, and it really, my love of writing songs sort of gradually diminished throughout the year. And I also realized that, so I ended up getting a new band, which was mostly session musicians. So people whose job it is to just play music on generally other people's albums and at gigs and things. And the musicians that I met, I mean, like, music was literally in their blood. Like, they could not have done any other job except music. And I felt like such a fraud, because for me, music was just this hobby. Like, really, psychology was the main thing. Music was just a really good way to procrastinate and not write my thesis. And it was just something that I thought was a bit fun. I felt really weird about the fact that I was the one with this record deal, and the one at the front of the band, kind of pretending I knew what I was doing, when the people behind me, like, metaphorically and literally, were the ones that really got music and had it in their blood, and I didn't. And it was a tough industry. And I remember having this conversation with John sort of towards the end of that year, and he said, like, Amantha, the expectation is that you'll be on tour for 11 months of the year. So you're going to have to start making some sacrifices in other areas of your life. And for me, that meant giving up psychology. And that was the thing that was in my blood, and I was not prepared to give up. And so at the end of that year, I ended up walking away from the deal.
Wow. It's fascinating listening to you. One of our other guests on Five My Life, a chap called James Valentine. I don't know if you know him from the ABC DJ. He had actually quite a successful career as a rock star. And he said it took him years to recover his love of music. Because the process, so he didn't make the decision you made. He did go and do the tour, around America and whatever else. And it's not all rock and roll, excuse the metonymy. It's a brutal, bloody, you can't afford your gum work, and you have to play the same sax solo every single night for 233 nights in a row. So I'm glad the world of organisational psychotherapy didn't lose you. and do you still gig? Can the Five of My Live listener base go and catch Amantha strutting her stuff, or has the guitar been put away?
God, only in my living room. So I did gig quite a bit during my 20s after I walked away from the deal, and it was fun. It was just gigging for fun, and I was still writing quite a lot as well. I had no idea. It was literally trial and error, and somehow I just kind of fluked some good chord progressions and lyrics, that people liked. But I'm stunned that I was able to do it. But yeah, funnily enough, like, I love playing the guitar and singing for fun now. But what I realized when, again, like in the process of leaving my marriage, is that for the time that I was with my ex-husband, we were together for about 13 years, I think, all up, I barely touched the guitar. And I certainly didn't write any songs. And since being on the other side of that marriage, I would be picking up that guitar at least once a week, if not more often. And it's just been so joyous to kind of bring music back into my life like that.
Wow. Well, it's been just an absolute treat for me to listen to your choices and the stories behind them on Five My Life, Amantha. I can't thank you enough for coming on and taking the format seriously. There is one final question, which is I've got to stop asking my guests in a certain way, because it reveals if they have or haven't listened to other episodes. Because the guests that go, "Oh, that's a surprise," clearly haven't bloody listened. Do you know what the sixth question is?
I can't remember, because I have listened to your episodes before, but I haven't for like a little while.
There you go. Well, it's the sixth question, which I take very seriously, and we follow them all up. Doesn't mean they all say yes, but lots of them do.
Oh, I know what it is. I've just remembered. Like, who would you like to see on the show?
That's exactly right. Who would you like to see on the show, and why?
I would say Lin-Manuel Miranda. So I know that it's really trendy to like Hamilton, and so he's the guy that created Hamilton. But I liked it when it wasn't as trendy. I just need to put that out there. So I think in 2017, so I saw Hamilton on Broadway quite a few years ago, with half of the original cast. And in the lead up to that night, which was a hideously expensive ticket for a very bad seat in the theatre, I think that like literally for a whole year, the only musical sounds that I listened to through my headphones was Hamilton. I listened to Hamilton and only Hamilton, all the songs in the show. Yeah, that was it. That was it for a year. So I'm such a fan of Lin-Manuel Miranda. So please get him.
So you're going to think I'm making this up, but I promise you this is true, is Kate and I went to see that last night.
Oh, did you? In Sydney? Oh,
for the first time.
What did you think?
I think maybe because of all the hype, I didn't see it in 2017 on Broadway. I saw it in the Lyric Theatre in Sydney in 2021, and I thought it was nice.
Oh, Nigel, no.
And I worry that I haven't got a heart or I haven't got a soul. But I mean, clearly, Lin-Manuel Miranda is a chuffing genius. And I went home and I Googled, Alexander Hamilton and blah, blah, blah. Yeah. But the truth is, yeah. But hey, it's not the 5 of my life, it's the 5 of your life. We're going to wish you lots of love with those gums on the dating apps. Going to try and hope that you do less overthinking, but keep up with the overachieving. And we love you, Amantha. I think everyone should check out your wonderful podcast, How I Work. Try and track down embarrassing old copies of your album. And I look forward to catching up with you in 2022. But thanks again. I really do appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Nigel. This has just been so fun. So fun. So thank you.
The 5 of My Life was presented by me, Nigel Marsh.